Thank you. Thank you for being here. A lot of people ask me, well, how did you get interested in doing this sort of thing? And one of my answers is that I boarded my first ship at age 3. And the voyage made such a lasting impression on me that I've carried over that interest in ships and shipwrecks ever since. Today, I'd like to share some stories I uncovered about the shipwrecks and the people connected to Point Montera and to Half Moon Bay. Now, these events all happened within just a 5-mile stretch between the two towns and along what John Steinbeck called the hard luck coast. And the reason for that was that it was the final approach to the Golden Gate corridor, and so it was, currents are very bad, signals were misheard, there was an eagerness to make that turn into the bay, and often captains and third mates and so on misjudged where they were going. But our voyage begins with the California gold rush. Far more immigrants came by sea than overland, seeking their fortunes as miners and merchants. Ships of all types journeyed from the East Coast to San Francisco, braving treacherous Cape Horn at the tip of South America. The trip was over 15,000 miles. They carried coffee and coal, fish and flour, livestock and liquor, mahogany and molasses, pianos and people, rice and railroad iron, sardines and soap, timber and tea, and much more. They were part of a vast network of commerce and trade which spurred the growth of cities, supported the expansion of maritime industries, and opened new gateways to the Far East. Many of them never reached their final destination. The first recorded shipwreck in Half Moon Bay happened in 1856. Known as a very fast bark with clipper lines, the Isabelita Hine was part of the lucrative China trade. She traveled the Silk Road of the sea, connecting the Far East with the Western world. The sleek little ship carried exotic goods such as silk, ivory, porcelain, jade, but it was tea that remained the heart of the trade. Recognizing the commercial opportunities, her owner, Gideon Nye, moved his operations from Baltimore to Canton. He wrote, "The very name of China suggested the romance of history and created imaginative dreams." Unfortunately, Nye's dreams were shattered in 1856 when his most profitable ship, the Isabelita Hine, foundered near Half Moon Bay. Many rumors swirled around the wreck. One report declared, "There was a mutiny. The captain and first mate were murdered, and the crew intentionally wrecked the ship to conceal evidence of their crime." Ultimately, it was determined that the captain had been weakened by illness and the greedy first mate drowned by the weight of his money belt. In the 1860s, America was in the throes of a bloody civil war. President Lincoln ordered a blockade of southern ports, which drastically affected the area's shipment of very crucial goods, and that included sugar. As a result, the sugar industry was decimated. A New Orleans newspaper said, "Many fine plantations now lay waste and idle." Schooners like the Elfin A. Knipper carried sugar to America from Peru. When the ship wrecked in 1862, local residents stole most of the 337,000 pounds of sugar. One newspaper said, "Some of it was taken to stores in town, but it was dumped out of the bags and into barrels so it couldn't be identified." And this is a common practice. You know, whenever there's a wreck, especially in small towns like this, whoever got there first went, gathered the goods, and they would take whatever it was. It didn't matter. Liquor, pianos, sugar, limes, porcelain, copper wire, lead paint, anything that they could use, coal, anything that they could use for their own homes. In 1865, the passenger ship Colorado was launched. Hailed as a floating palace, the $1 million side wheel steamer was the largest to ever ply the Pacific. The Colorado's inaugural voyage was highly anticipated. One account noted, "Flags waved and bands played. The crowd cheered wildly. Salutes were fired from guns on the steamer and on the wharves." She was also the first American liner to carry mail as well as passengers to the Orient. After she foundered in 1868 at Point Montera, she floated free, but the near disaster left its mark on public sentiment. The ledge where she struck became known as Colorado Reef. In 1872, the British iron sailing ship Aculeo was lost near Half Moon Bay. The captain and crew made their way to shore and began gathering up bits of the cargo. Some of the goods were Christmas toys. According to one account, Captain McKay salvaged a china doll and slipped it into the arms of the first little girl he saw. In later years, the wreck was captured on canvas by noted coastal artist Galen Wolfe. He created a series of watercolor mosaics called Legends of the Coastland, which depicted local historical events. Wolfe immortalized the Aculeo in this work called The Toy Ship. It had personal meaning for him. The little girl Captain McKay encountered was Galen Wolfe's mother. And if you can see at the lower right-hand side, there's a little doll there, which represents that doll. And according to a friend of mine, Shannon Nottstadt, who wrote a book about Galen Wolfe, the little doll used to sit at the table, the dinner table, especially for birthday parties. So she presided over that for many, many years. Very famous little doll. The Aculeo's loss made a lasting impression on others too. In 1875, a fog signal began operating at Point Montera, also built recorders for two keepers and their families. After the wreck of many other vessels, the first light was established in 1900, which was very late. The first lights were established around 1855. Lights like Pigeon Point were established in the 1870s, 1872. So this was a very late comer to the process. And it was simply a red lantern on a post. So it stood out on there, and that's all it was. But then this skeleton tower, followed in 1914. And you can see why they call it a skeleton tower. It just sits on four little legs and is up there at a small lens. In 1928, a cast iron tower was erected and still stands today. The significance of this tower only became known recently. In fact, just when I was finishing my book on the subject, researchers discovered that it had been moved from Cape Cod, making Point Montera the only lighthouse in America to have stood on both Atlantic and Pacific shores. Wow. So that 30-foot little tower is actually very famous. I mean, who knew? I've lived there for 24 years. I didn't know. Point Montera's beacon was automated in 1970. The fourth order Fresnel lens is on permanent display at the San Mateo County History Museum at an exhibit called Ships of the World. And it sits there with artifacts from the wreck of the Rydal Hall and the New York, and which I'll be also talking about. As part of the exhibit, I am featured on a video that highlights local maritime history. So that was a very interesting project for me, and it's a permanent exhibit. So these are some of the artifacts that they have, including the actual lens from the lighthouse. It was a wonderful opportunity for me, and well worth going to see, by the way, too. When the cargo ship Rydal Hall crashed at Point Montera in 1876, excuse me, 10 of the crew perished. Coal and fragments of the ship littered the beach. One man, Chico Gonzalez, gathered up an old wooden sea chest. I had the privilege of meeting his son, John Gonzalez, or his grandson, John Gonzalez Jr. And he told me, that old sea chest has been around in my family for years. My dad packed it around with him everywhere he went. Well, the sea chest was a very appropriate memento for John Gonzalez Sr., who is, you see here, he was in the Navy, obviously, because he turned out to be a keeper at Point Montera in the 1950s and 60s. The Rydal Hall's sunken hull was rediscovered quite by accident in 1971. Divers John Kepf and Roy Lee were poking around a reef on an abalone hunt. They found anchors, cannon, and even the ship's bell. Kepf said, "When I spotted a knob sticking out of the pile, I knew it was something special. That bell is priceless." And you can see the bell, the one gentleman is holding the bell down at the bottom there, and then that's one of the cannon. There's also an anchor that they save that sits out, I don't know how many of you know Half Moon Bay, that sits out in what is now known as the Half Moon Bay Brewing Company. So it's a restaurant at the harbor. So it's sitting right out there behind the restaurant. Built in 1870, the Alice Buck saw an illustrious line of master mariners stand upon her decks. Captain Henry McGilvery, a noted shipmaster, built and owned the Alice Buck. He was widely known as, quote, a man of high character and remarkable ability. When McGilvery retired to embark on other adventures, he selected Captain Phineas Pendleton II. Let me try that again. Captain Phineas Pendleton II as master of the Alice Buck. A kind-hearted, although he doesn't appear to be, he was a kind-hearted and generous man, known for maintaining a productive crew and for taking his vessels safely to port. In those days, I think they considered it, dignified to be very serious, despite their own personality traits. After only a handful of voyages aboard the Alice Buck, Pendleton turned the helm over to his son-in-law, Captain William H. Blanchard. Blanchard had a fine reputation, too. Innovative when a ship was in trouble, he saved his ship and crew many, many times. During one storm at sea, he even presided over the birth of a baby girl. The child became an actress of note and was later known for her role as Auntie M in The Wizard of Oz. Following Blanchard was Captain James Harriman, who hailed from an old seafaring family as well. In 1881, Captain Herman Henningsen was asked to fill in briefly. It would be the Alice Buck's final voyage. When she wrecked at Half Moon Bay, reports said, the ship struck with an awful crash on the rocks. She bumped 5 or 6 times and at last broke in 2. 9 of the crew perished. And like the Aculeo, the Alice Buck stirred Galen Wolfe's imagination. This rendering, simply called The Wreck, captures the ship's disastrous end. Schooners, like the Argonaut, were an important part of maritime commerce. Schooners were the trucks of their day, and I really actually come to love those little ships because they hauled everything up and down this coast, in and out of small ports that were called dog hole ports. Very difficult maneuvering and very dangerous work. And these tiny ports were called dog hole ports because supposedly old sailors said there was hardly enough room for a dog to crawl in, turn around, and crawl back out. When the Argonaut wrecked in 1881, Keeper David Splain ran to the rescue. He launched a small boat, bringing the captain and crew safely to shore. A local election was in progress, and so the crew plunged eagerly into the celebration, just as if nothing had happened. Captain Lovedale remarked, "I've been shipwrecked 6 times, but never before have I been cast up among so many kind people, so many pretty women, and such good grub." Originally named the T.F. Oakes, the New York was one of only 3 full-rig iron sailing ships ever built in this country. She was also one of the most notorious ships to ever sail. She was often written up in what was called the Red Record, which was a column run in the Coast Seaman's Journal highlighting incidents of shipboard cruelty. The T.F. Oakes earned the reputation of a ship on which, quote, the blows were plenty and the food was scarce. During one disastrous voyage from Hong Kong in 1896, the ship was caught in a series of storms. The captain was partially paralyzed by a stroke, and the crew came down with scurvy. Most of them died. The captain's wife, Hannah Reed, took the helm and sailed the ship safely to port. This took actually 8 months. She was described as a sturdy, gray-haired, slate-eyed woman of 50, and she was awarded a silver medal for her bravery. The ship was sold and renamed the New York, but that didn't change her bad luck. Carrying a cargo from Hong Kong, she wrecked at Half Moon Bay in 1898 and sank into the sand. And again, if you know Half Moon Bay, it's actually down Kelly Avenue where Francis State Beach is. Right behind there is where this beach is, and that's where the ship went down. And once again, so many residents rushed down to this, and there are still people in town that I know very well, and their families have passed down porcelain plates, the captain's chair, all kinds of things that came out of that wreck. So those artifacts are still around in the community and have been passed down through the generations. The city of Florence was built on Scotland's famous River Clyde. For more than 30 years, she weathered storms around Cape Horn. At the helm was Captain William Leask, who was described this way: "It only took a glance at the keen gray eyes peering from beneath bushy eyebrows, the determined set of a square lower jaw, to note a man accustomed to command." In 1899, Captain Leask retired from the sea after being bashed in the head by a steward who was stealing liquor. Leaving the deck of the ship for the last time, he said, "Poor old Florence, it won't be long now." He lived long enough to see his prophecy come true. The following year, the city of Florence met her demise just 200 yards from where the infamous New York fell. The USS DeLong was a Navy destroyer named for the famous Arctic explorer, George DeLong. The ship was thrown off course and plowed into the reefs at Point Montera in 1921. Rescue teams arrived, set up a breeches buoy, and began bringing the stranded crew ashore. What a breeches buoy is basically a pair of rubber pants attached to a life buoy. And then a line is shot from the land to the ship. And one by one, the crew is brought to shore. And that's very useful in cases like this, where the ship was so close to shore, it was too dangerous for little vessels to go out from shore, or larger ones to come in from the ocean side. Now, the crew was saved, but the ship was scrapped and used as repair parts for other ships. John Lindstrom is said to have built more steam schooners than anyone else on the West Coast. One of the ships he built in 1907 was called Gray's Harbor. In 1922, the ship ran ashore near Point Montera, but it was partially salvaged. While Lindstrom was an honorable man, it seems that some of the schooner's crew were enticed into a shady business of transporting illegal liquor. Between 1920 and 1933, Prohibition was in effect, banning the manufacture, transportation, and use of alcohol. Well, obviously, the law was very unpopular. Reveling in an otherwise liberated era, many citizens enjoyed a good stiff drink now and again, even if it was illegal. The Gray's Harbor had several brushes with the law. One, 45 quarts of illicit brew were confiscated by local officials. One December, Holiday Spirits had a setback when 20 cases of whiskey were discovered hidden in the captain's quarters. Well, there are many, many more ships, and I could go on and on with the different stories, but this is an example of what has happened. All this and more happened along just that small 5-mile stretch of coast. Point Montera and its shipwrecks are important portals to the past. The human stories are especially important, whether they're about coastal residents or shipping magnates, sailing masters or ordinary seamen, lighthouse keepers or women who save the day. They are a deep part of our history, a history to be explored, understood, and preserved. Thank you, and I'll take a few questions and sign some books if anybody likes. So any questions? Yes, Val?
When did you start writing your books? I know I came, about the Hardlight Coast, but I was amazed to see how many other books you've written.
Well, the first book was Pigeon Point, that's the Scallywags book. That was published in 2007. I started working on it prior to that, 2007. Each book takes 2 to 3 years to write and research because I travel up and down this coast, but also the East Coast and back. Records are scattered all over the place. So you really have to hunt for not only the records, but images. I'm very particular about the images I like to use. And so that's a lengthy process. But yes, that was first, and then Hardlight Coast was second in 2010. Pigeon Point, I think, is in its third printing. Hardlight Coast is in its second printing. Sea of Troubles came out in 2012, and Then Pirates, Pinnacles, and Petticoats, which involves, and the reason for the title is that there were women lighthouse keepers, the first ones on the West Coast at Point Pinos. And that book came out just last year. And so I write for the books, but I also write for a lot of maritime journals across the country as well, and I enjoy doing that. Yeah, it's my passion.
No, where is it where is Hardlock Coast?
Oh, well, it's that strip, that 5-mile strip between Half Moon Bay and Point Montera. That's what Steinbeck called the Hardlock Coast. And so it's just that stretch. But as I said, it is called that because it is that last final approach into the Golden Gate, which is very dangerous. And there was another sort of obscure, in some other obscure writing is where I found it, actually. I can't remember it right now where it was, but I was shocked when I found it. And when I did, I said, yes, that's exactly what I need to do for this book. Yeah, surprised me. But he was, not just in Monterey, he was up and down this coast. I think a lot of people, as you say, identify him with that area primarily, but he was all along this coast. Other questions? Yes.
Slight segue to pirates.
Yes. Well, pirates. Well, it's the book's title, The Pirates, Pinnacles, and Petticoats, comes from, actually, they weren't pirates in the sense of Johnny Depp. Yeah, I know. It would be good if I could find that, but I can't. They were actually people who were skirting the law. And this was in the 1830s, this period of time, where a lot of vessels were coming in, and the area was just developing. California wasn't even a state yet. And so there were a lot of trading vessels that would bring goods in. They knew that they would be, and bring them to the customs house. They knew that they would be devalued there through friendly officials. And then they could take that cargo, that same cargo, and send it out and make a huge profit. They didn't have to pay the huge custom taxes on it. So that's where the so-called, they were really called smugglers, smuggling ships and smugglers, because of that practice. But it was also a practice that was a very acceptable business practice. I found a quote that said that they just, well, that's just how business was done in those days. So I found that very interesting. And then, of course, Pinnacles is rocks, and Petticoats is for the lady lighthouse keepers. Well, good, thank you for your attention, and if anybody's interested in a book or has another question, please come over and see us. Thank you.